All right, topic of the week time. We're going to talk about video game music appreciation, all the soundtracks, the music, and the original works that we like from the games we've been playing throughout our life. We've got a lot of interesting things to talk about. This is why we brought Brian on today, because he had a lot he wanted to say about video game soundtracks. So, Brian, why don't you go ahead and kick this off with the Doom reboot soundtrack?
I guess my first point is just that, part of the reason that I wanted to be on this particular episode is that music and video games are sort of the things that I'm kind of drawn to the most when I'm not raising goats for the bastards of gaming. I write for Regen magazine, and music is my jam. I'm really into it. But as far as Doom goes, I think the thing that is so amazing about Doom is that it was able to kind of come out of nowhere and reinvent what a soundtrack could be. I think Mick Gordon went above and beyond, and there's plenty of videos out there of him talking about how he made the soundtrack that are worth watching. And the soundtrack, I mean, it was just a phenomenon. From the moment that you start the game, it just sort of takes over and steers everything that you're seeing, all the action, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I love how it starts with the last little dun when he cocks the shotgun. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that was when I knew that we're in for a epic ride with the music and this game once that happened.
And we're done for the night.
That went nowhere fast.
Okay, so what I thought was really cool about the process of making this was how Mick Gordon basically said that he was going to completely change the process of how he was making music to create something completely different for the game, because that's what was asked of him. And it's such a generic thing to ask of a musician, like write something no one's ever heard before. It has to be brand new and fresh, and it has to fit perfectly in with all the artwork and the feel of the game. And the video that we all actually watched, I forget what it's actually called on YouTube, but there's a video of Mick Gordon giving a presentation of how he came to the sound that is used throughout Doom. And
yeah, it's a GDC talk, so if you can just Google that or look it up on YouTube. It's some GDC talk from last year, was it? Was it 2017 or 2018?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But you could probably type in like Mick Gordon GDC Doom, and it probably comes up. So basically what he did was he took like a whole bunch of like sub sounds, like subwoofer sounds, and just put them through all these side chains and distortion and all this crazy stuff. And since everything was being mixed down at the end after going through all these different processes, it was creating a sound that would morph on its own. And he would turn knobs and stuff and like change things to kind of give it another an otherworldly sound, if you will. But the sound itself was just like morphing on its own because of just how like sound physics work. It's just crazy to see it, and it's just kind of an amazing thing that all these things could happen like that.
It's not meant to be buzzing. That's that buzzing over there. A gap. Here it is run through that array. All I'm doing is changing the amplitude and then tweaking some of the knobs as I go.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting in the beginning of that was when they basically came to him and said, like, no guitars. And I'm sitting here as an old school guitar player. And I'm like, what? Why would you ever say that? So I was like, and I had to think for a second when you said, I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure there was guitars in the game, because I know that's why I liked it. That's going to be a theme you're going to see throughout this topic, is my love of sort of guitars and guitar stuff in video game soundtracks. And so like when they were coming at him and saying, you're going to make this like sort of heavy metal demon video game, and you're not going to have like metal guitars in it, I was kind of like, huh? And so I like that. I like how he actually approached that, where he did bring it in later, and they actually let him put guitars in. But that was after he had done all the stuff that you were talking about, as far as making this unique sound. And it was just an interesting layer that sort of pulled it all together for me. Just was having those metal guitars over everything.
The way that he blended the guitar sounds with the chainsaw noise just blows me away, especially in that particular video where he's discussing how he did it. To hear the two components on their own and then combined, I don't know, it gives you a new appreciation for sort of all the nuances that go into the things that are happening in the background. It's something that it's not something you're going to notice immediately in every single game, but I mean, I think a good soundtrack for a game is one that grabs your attention and sort of like it enhances your experience, but it also is something that's strong enough to stand on its own, or to merit getting your attention on its own.
Yeah, and I think I think this Doom soundtrack is kind of one of all of our three favorite soundtracks in this whole list. It's kind of something that we've all sort of identified with. We brought it up briefly a couple weeks ago in one of our podcasts. We kind of went and had a little aside talking about the Doom soundtrack briefly for a second. But yeah, this kind of puts everything that I love about music just in general into the soundtrack of this game. Like I said, I'm a guitar player, I like metal music and stuff like that. So any video game with that kind of sound, I'm definitely on board with it. And so I think Synther and Brian here are coming at it more from the synthy side of it, whereas I'm coming at it from more of the guitar side of it. But it meshes very well together, and it sounds really great. So it kind of shows that if you incorporate all these different elements that people like into something, like sometimes it can bring people together. That's what music does, is it brings people together. And so this was like the first sort of video game soundtrack that we were all wanted to talk about on here, because we all love it so much.
So plus, I think that for the industrial sort of side of it, I like the fact that in the video where he's talking about how he made it, he references back to the soundtrack for Doom 3, which was a good soundtrack in its own right. Maybe not quite as groundbreaking or as Mick Gordon's soundtrack, but he mentions Chris Brenna, who was the drummer for Nine Inch Nails for many, many years, and he's since gone off and done his own thing as Tweaker, and a very accomplished, very talented musician in his own right. But that was also kind of approaching like the mid to late 90s and early 2000s when stuff like that's coming out, and you have, I mean, it wasn't the first time that, just to sort of transition a little bit here, it wasn't the first time that like id Software had had experimental like industrial soundtracks. Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails had previously done the soundtrack for the first Quake game. And in that game, like, of course you get the nail gun, and like the boxes of ammo have the little Nine Inch Nails logo on them. But the soundtrack was absolutely amazing. So it I don't know. I think there's a high bar for Doom and Quake soundtracks from here on out.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say that type of music really fits that atmosphere, though. It really fits with like the visceral brutalness that you're like inflicting upon demons or inflicting upon like possessed people and stuff like that. So it just fits. Like it goes hand in hand, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And a sort of futuristic, sort of sci-fi industrial corporation on Mars, harvesting hell's energy and all this stuff kind of feeds into the idea of this like really industrial music sound. And then, with the demons and all the evil stuff, that's where, the sort of heavy metal guitar sound comes in. And, I understand their initial inclination to not do the most generic thing possible, which is just have heavy metal music playing as the soundtrack. And so while I would have not banned guitars outright, because ultimately that led to creating the ultimate sound for this soundtrack, in my opinion, pulling it all together. I could see where they were just like, let's not do the thing that everyone thinks we're going to do with the soundtrack, which is just have like heavy metal music playing in the background,
Since you're talking about the Hell's Energy part, when Mick Gordon was creating the sound, it's just interesting that sort of like untamed, side-chained, crazy process subwoofer sound itself is almost like Hell's Energy, where it's just this crazy, uncontrollable energy that it just morphs and like sparks off and lightning bolts come off of it. And it's just, I see that connection with like the visual of Hell's Energy and that sound that he created for the game. And it's all through the entire game, because that's the soundtrack, just like when you go to Hell and partly on Mars, where the Hell's Energy is like the core of the planet, and it's seeping into reality. I don't know, I just thought it was like a cool way of bridging the two things together.
You made a brilliant point. It's a little hard to follow that up, but that is essentially what it does, and I think that's kind of what, at least for me, leaves me a little bit stumped about what to say about it, because I'm just kind of blown away. Like when you play the game, you have an appreciation for it, and you're like, this is really great, but you learn about what went into it, and the different experiments that he tried, the things that he hid inside of some of the waveforms and everything. Like, it's, you just are left in awe of it. I had an appreciation for it before I knew what went into it, and then after sort of finding out his method and his process for making it, and how it tied so closely to the theme of the game, I just think that it's an absolute masterpiece. It just is.
I like the 666 and pentagram stuff hidden in the wave files, and so I thought it was like a cool little touch there.
Yeah, so what he did was, for the viewers, you could take a picture and you can use like a spectrograph, and what it'll do is it'll transform an image into like a sound wave, and it could be like anything. It usually doesn't really sound like anything, but he would take like an image of a 6, and then he would put 666 into like the 4/4 beat of the song, and it'd kind of be hidden in there. You wouldn't really notice it, but he hid those things in it. And another one he did was he played like a clip of somebody saying Jesus loves you in reverse, and that harkens back to like old school like Satanism, where people are playing records backwards and stuff, and there's hidden meanings and whatever. So he really went back into the whole like Satan worshipping type stuff from old and added in all these references and stuff, and it's quite funny to people that enjoy that sort of thing. I'm sure there's people that are appalled by it and they're like, oh my god, I'm playing a game that's giving me subliminal messages, which it's not. But it's like a nice nod to that sort of culture.
Yeah, it's just crazy that there's so many layers to this. Like, I think most people just listen to a video game soundtrack, and this one specifically, and you can't even begin to understand all the different levels of things going on and the ways in which he basically came to the sound that is the soundtrack, and all the different things that went into it. It's crazy when you see what goes on behind the scenes, because you wouldn't think that much work actually went into it. You would, like me, or just me personally, I just assumed that, because I'm not really up on how industrial metal bands and stuff like that create their sound necessarily. I'm more of a purist when it comes to music. I'm about playing instruments, so I didn't really know that much about the sort of synthy technical side of things. So it was very interesting for me to learn about things that I never even knew about. If you would have told me all these different things went into making those sounds and stuff like that, I would have never believed it, or I wouldn't have thought it went as deep as it does. But it's pretty crazy.
I'm such a musical purist. I listen to unpolished French horns, so I don't. Yeah. I never bother learning about anything else.
I just want clean guitar sounds, just one mic in the room, and it just records everything, with one take kind of thing. Yeah.